Hi, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Here's your host, Representative Rick Crawford.
Hey, folks. Welcome to Tune In. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. We've got a lot to talk about this week. The highway bill extension, a nuclear Iran, sanctuary cities. We'll talk about all that and more when we come back. And we are back. We want to get to a couple of things that are really hot topics. One of them that's coming up making a lot of news is the Iranian nuclear deal. And I really need to talk in some detail about this so that you understand what's coming up with that and what all these negotiations entailed and what we're going to consider when we come back from August break in September. First, Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in return for easing of economic sanctions. Well, I think the sanctions were working. Let me go back and just tell you that I really don't think that we had any reason to negotiate with Iran for anything in the first place. I don't think we should have validated or legitimized that regime by sitting down at the table with them. That there was plenty of evidence to show that the sanctions were working. That said, that's my perspective. The president decided to go and negotiate with this state sponsor of terror, and that's unfortunate. Under the terms of his agreement that his team negotiated, they still get to keep thousands of centrifuges and maintain a program focused on nuclear research and development. Now, they say that's for energy, and keeping in mind, of course, that this is one of the richest oil countries on the planet. And so you've kind of got to wonder about why they feel the need to develop this from a power perspective. And the answer is they don't. They want nuclear weapons. That said, another one of the concessions that President Obama and his team made is that Iran doesn't have to be inspected anytime, anywhere. Now, throughout these negotiations, we were told that the anytime, anywhere provision would remain. Instead, the process for inspections could end with arbitration, and Iran could delay the inspections for up to 24 days, which obviously would give them plenty of time to conceal any wrongdoing and possibly some cheating that might be taking place. The president now maintains that if Iran cheats, then all those sanctions would snap back into place. However, that sounds fairly easy. In fact, it's not that easy to impose those sanctions because it would require all kinds of cooperations from other nations, and nations such as Russia and China, who may be predisposed to allowing Iran to continue their nuclear goals. So trying to say that we're going to let those sanctions snap back is a little bit of a reach. Another thing that concerns me in this agreement is that Iran is entitled to an immediate cash infusion of $140 billion in frozen assets they could immediately use to continue to pursue destabilizing activities. For example, funding Hezbollah, funding the Houthis, who just overthrew the government in Yemen. And so not only that, but they would have unfettered access to billions of dollars more in revenue as a result of their access to the international oil markets. So I'm really not happy with this deal with Iran. We've got 60 days to review the deal. Just to be clear, we could kill this in theory as we have a 60-day review. However, it does require a two-thirds majority because it needs to be a veto-proof vote. So that means 67 votes in the House, 67 votes in the Senate, 287, I believe, in the House. So it's going to be difficult to push back against this. We need all hands on deck. It's still unclear where the Democrats stand on this issue. There are a whole lot that are concerned that this is not a good deal, and if they will side with us on this, then we may see some daylight on that. So we'll keep you posted on that. On the other issue, we want to talk about highway funding. We just passed an extension that would authorize basically federal transportation programs through the end of October of this year and provide contract and budget authority to allow states to continue funding programs and projects. Not really happy with this. We're still wrestling with pay-fors. We did an identical bill to this just a couple of weeks ago in the House that basically said we had a 5-month patch that tightened tax reporting requirements to reduce inaccurate reporting, and that was one of the pay-fors, adjusted tax filing deadlines for businesses, and equalized taxes on natural gas fuels. We still have to wrestle with the long-term reauthorization and how we address one of the critical components of that, and that being the Highway Trust Fund and how it has really not kept pace over the years with the economy and with new, more fuel-efficient vehicles and the amount of travel that people are doing in this economy. So passage of this extension essentially gives us a little more time for Ways and Means Committee to finalize any of the offsets for the House's long-term highway bill, which would allow us to bring the bill to the floor and conference with the Senate before those authorizations expire in October. Again, not real happy with the way these are shaping up, but I think it's important to understand that we do need to continue funding so that our road builders back home in Arkansas do have the resources they need to continue operations on those highway projects that are currently in progress. And you've driven all across the state, particularly on I-40. We see a lot of construction there. West Memphis is a huge bottleneck as we see a lot of construction right there. But there's not been a time in my life that I can recall that I-40 was not under construction somewhere between Memphis and Little Rock. There's always a lot of construction going on. So we know that it's very, very important, and we've got other projects to consider as well as just I-40. And so it's important to understand just exactly why we're engaged in this battle and why it's important to authorize a long-term highway bill. And I stress long-term because, we've done this back in 2011, I believe, when we passed, or 2012, we passed MAP 21, which was essentially about a 22-month reauthorization. That really doesn't help road builders in the long term to kind of make the capital investments they need to sustain progress on a given project and hire new people, buy new equipment, and so on. So we're concerned about that. We want to do a long-term bill. The Senate actually had a 6-year bill that they talked about, but it was only funded for 3 years. And so I didn't really care for the way that was paid for, and I certainly didn't care for the idea that we're going to authorize a 6-year bill, but we're only going to pay for 3 years of it. And then at the end of that 3-year period, which would more likely be 2 or maybe even less, we'll have to talk about how we fund the balance of this long-term reauthorization. So I think we have to take this into account that we've got to look long-term and figure out ways to address that. So highways and Iran, two pretty big issues. But one other thing, we voted on in the House just recently, and that was a bill to address the phenomenon taking place in sanctuary cities, where you see local law enforcement that is not enforcing immigration law and essentially sets up a sanctuary. As we saw in San Francisco, there are a lot of other cities that do the same thing. So what we did in the House was say that, look, as a condition of you receiving federal funding, you're going to have to stop these sanctuary policies, basically saying you're going to have to enforce federal law if you're going to continue to see federal dollars flow into your city, particularly to your law enforcement agencies that are charged with keeping people safe. And so we think that's a responsible approach. We know that, as it applies to the Constitution, these federal laws do have supremacy as it applies to immigration. And so I don't like the idea that cities can just pick and choose what laws they would like to enforce based on any number of factors that they consider, whether it be political correctness or whatever. The fact remains that we've seen evidence, as you have most recently, that we can't continue to allow sanctuary cities to operate without some consequence. And so we've taken that action in the House, and hopefully the Senate will take that up and we can address that on an ongoing basis. So I appreciate you guys tuning in again. I'm flying solo this week. We're getting ready for August recess, and we'll talk about what we have on the agenda for August recess when we come back right after this. Hey folks, this is Congressman Rick Crawford. Are you planning a trip to Washington anytime soon? Well, we want to make it as easy as possible for you to enjoy your trip. Just Google Representative Rick Crawford and you'll find our website. When you do, click on Serving You at the top of the website and then select Touring DC. The tour request form will come up and it's easy to fill out. If you have any trouble, just contact our office and we're happy to help. We want to make your family's trip to our nation's capital as enjoyable as possible. Thanks so much for visiting our website, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. And we're back. Want to let you know what's going on as we approach the August recess. A little bit of a misnomer. August recess sort of implies that we're just going to play around for a month. In fact, August is one of our busiest months of the year. We spend a lot of time in the district driving up and down the roads. I talked about the highway bill. We'll get a firsthand view of what's taking place across the district with regard to our highways and bridges in the district and throughout the state. But not only do I hit the road, the staff comes with me, and we spend a lot of time out in the district talking to constituents on a variety of issues. One of the things that we do every year is an annual ag tour. So this ag tour in particular, a couple of things we're going to do. Obviously, we have an advisory council. We'll talk to our livestock and poultry producers. We'll talk to our row crop producers. And then one thing we're adding this year is what we're calling our Ag Pilot Fly-In. What we've got scheduled down in Stuttgart is essentially statewide. There are an awful lot of aerial applicators, the bulk of which operate in the 1st Congressional District, but there's some elsewhere, in the Arkansas River Valley and down in the southwest part of the state. And we're going to invite all of them. But we've got a couple of issues that we want to talk about specifically with the Ag Pilots. One of them involves EPA, because not only are they pilots, but they're applicators, and so they have to have the restricted use pesticide application permit, and they deal with the EPA with the things that they fly onto crops. So EPA is an issue with them, but also the FAA reauthorization and how that impacts them. We want to hear from them. This is set up to get feedback from them. And here's another key issue I think is important to recognize. UAVs, or drones, are really starting to see a lot more activity in agriculture, precision ag, and the use of drones to help map fields and to monitor fields and assist farmers in making very timely decisions. And how do those UAVs interact with ag pilots? We're going to bring them together, bring them to the table so they can discuss how to do it safely and one doesn't interfere with the other. And so that's important. The other thing, we have a couple of advisory councils, actually. They're sort of a geographic prerogative. One is in the east part of the district. The other is over in the Ozark region of the district. We'll be dealing with them and talking about what their plans are and what their views are with respect to economic development in the various regions. So we're going to spend a lot of time on the road from top to bottom, east to west, and covering a lot of ground. And if you want to take a look at our website, crawford.house.gov, check out our Facebook page. You can find us on Twitter. And we'll keep you posted as these things develop and let you know what's taking place in the district throughout the month of August. And also want to remind you, if you'd like to be a part of Tune In, send us your questions on Twitter at TuneInAR1. And we'd love to hear from you. I just want to remind you to put your name and your hometown on there so we can include you and attribute your comments and questions appropriately. And until the next one, we appreciate you being part of Tune In. We'll see you next time. Thanks.